Okay, folks, welcome to another episode of My Life with Robert Burns. Jim Thompson, Douglas Mackenzie here again to talk to one of our Burns cronies from around the Burns world. Hi, Jim, how you doing?
Good. Doing as good as I can, Douglas, on this smashing day.
Good. Tonight, folks, our guest is an artist, he's an author, he's a piper, and he's a teacher. So tonight, cronies everywhere, please welcome Duncan Brown.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
How are you doing, Duncan?
I'm doing fine. Just ask away. I'll tell you as much as I possibly can.
Good. Well, the first question is always a simple one. It's just, Duncan, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. To them that's tuned in to see these marvellous paintings, my name is Duncan Brown. To them I owe money to, my name is Douglas Mackenzie. No, I was born 71 years ago, 1950, and I think my earliest interest in art I would be maybe 4-year-old when I think probably my parents took me to a Christmas party, and it was in the Rolls Royce in Blantyre, and the wee boy that I was, being every wee boy and girl at the time, they'd be fascinated with the Santa Claus. Obviously, the parents had paid the ticket for the party thing. So all the kids were going to get a present. It was already paid for by their parents. The kids didn't know that, but being the wee boy that I was given a box by a Santa Claus guy. And I was fascinated. I thought it was a giant box, probably only a wee thing. But inside the box, it was plasticine with molds in it, with animals' heads and whatnot. And you could press the mold onto the plasticine, and then you had an image. Well, I was fascinated with it. That's my earliest remembrance, anything to do with art. And I thought, I'm going to try and do this myself with the molds. And it just grew and grew from there. My old grandfather, old Sam Clements, he was an old Cameron Highlander. My old grandpa left me loads of sayings and phrases, which I remembered into my adulthood. I dare say I've forgotten a lot of them as well, but some of them stayed with me. And I also remember him saying, when I would be drawing or making these wee model things, the wee boy that I was, my grandpa said to me one time, he said, "You're a clever wee bugger," he said, and when you're a big boy, he said, people will pay you lots of compliments. He said, but just remember this, he said, compliments are like food, son. Enjoy it, but don't swallow it. And we were all sitting around about, saying, that's great, Grandpa, but didn't know what he was talking about. He had loads of them. If you wanted to do, or he wanted you to do something, and you didn't do it, one of his phrases was, "You'll never plough a field by turning the hour in your mind, son." Of course, as an adult, you know what that is you've got to get some effort into it. Another brilliant one was, the man on top of Mount Everest didn't fall there, And you're saying, is that a fact, Grandpa? Well, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. I was impressed, but no idea what he was talking about. But for some reason, these ones stayed with me. There's loads of other ones stayed with me, but I'll maybe add them in later on.
Aye, good. So take us back to the beginning. Where did you go to school, and how did you get on at school, that kind of thing?
School, I was in about 6 different schools because I think my parents' hobbies was moving house and to different towns and villages, and it meant I wouldn't get any longer than about 1.5 years in every school that was in. So I never got any chance to settle down and learn a bit. But my very first school was in Burnbank, Greenfield Primary School. It's all gone now. They knocked it down. But I was in 6 schools. Not the best education, but I couldn't help that. I was just a wee boy.
So, and was it the same at secondary school?
Yeah, I went to, the Greenfield Primary School, and then they flitted to East Kilbride, and went to Maxwellton Primary School there, and they flitted to Leiston Hall. I went to Leiston Hall Primary School there, and we flitted back to Burnbank. I went to Glenlee Primary School there, and then from there went to Greenfield Secondary School. and I was there for 4 or 5 years. Left in 1965, left on the Friday, and I was working on the Monday. So that was my school, and not to speak of, but the rest of my life has been on education, more school years. Really.
So did your dad get commissioned for Pickford or something like that?
It was a joiner, and all the building sites that you know, you'd be working on a building site, and then they would move you on to another building site, another one, and another one. And I don't know if it came to that or not, but there was nothing I could do to control or moving from one house to another.
No. So what was when you left school? What did you do?
Left school, left, as I say, on the Friday, and on the Monday, I was working in Hector Powell's clothing factory in Blantyre. Just doing the road for the Rolls Royce engineering there. So I was in there for a couple of years, and then I emigrated to Canada.
Wow.
And I needed to get out of the situation I was in. Something didn't feel right working in a factory, you know. Went to Canada. I was there a year and a half, and I came back to Scotland in 1969, I think it was, and I went into engineering. Joined an engineering company and went from there to Phillips factory. And I was an engineer and I was a setter in the Phillips factory for about 7 years before I left there to become self-employed as an artist, because I found that the factories that I was working in, I could sit down and, as I was doing my job, if I did the job well, I could sit down and I could have 10, 15 minutes just letting the machines go and do what they were there to do. But I'd be sitting sketching people that were working on other machines. So eventually I had a big book full of sketches of other people that were in the factory. And I kind of unconsciously think, there's something in this for me. I'm going to go somewhere else other than sitting here getting dirty manky in a factory. And I think it was a mistake to leave Phillips factory and go self-employed, because I had no idea what self-employment was. Chopping doors, doing paintings, trying to sell the paintings, framing paintings, keeping my own accounts. Man, there's 4 or 5 full-time jobs people are getting paid full-time to do. I mean, the chair you're sitting on just right now, the chair you're sitting on, the guy that made it didn't sell it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
A salesman sold that chair that you're sitting on. But it's the same with me. I would do a painting, but there's salesmen out there who could sell it. But I was trying to do the whole thing myself, and it was a nightmare. I remember one time I got up and I was going to go out, chap more doors, and I opened the fridge door and I said to my wife, we've got an egg left in the fridge. Will we have it for breakfast, or will we see if I can sell something today and maybe have something later on? So I went out that day and I chapped the door, a big house at the Peacock Cross in Hamilton. And the lady asked me in, I had my portfolio with me. And she said, oh, you're selling paintings? I said, yep. She said, oh, I want to see what you've got. So I opened the portfolio and I spread all the paintings, the unframed things, onto the big floor, big wooden floor. She had, oh, she said, I love them, I like them, I like that one, I like this one. And then she chose, it was a drawing I had done of a lion's head. I like that, what do you want for that? So keep in mind, I had an egg in my fridge that morning. And I said to her, give me a £5 for it. So this would be about 1979-ish, 1979, 80. She says, oh, that's good, that's good. So I put everything back into the portfolio. And she said, my sister might be interested in this as well. She said, because these are really good. I said, well, there's a business card. You can have the business card. No thinking that I would hear from her sister. But sure enough, the next day, the phone call came. And I went down to her sister's house, and she stayed in an even bigger house. And she asked me in, and it was the same process there. I took all the paintings out the portfolio, spread them out on the big floor. Oh, she says, I love these. My sister was dead right. Yes, I like that, I like that, I like that. I says, well, sure, your call. So she picked this painting that I had done of a tigress with 5 cubs. So there was a bit more work in that one. There wasn't just a lion's head. So she says, how much do you want for that? So I said, give me £6 then. So she gave me the £6, and I was putting everything back out into my portfolio. And she said, you know, that's not really good business, son. And I'm expecting a joke, you know. I said, how do you mean? Well, you know, you took £5 off my sister and you've took £6 off of me. She said, you shouldn't really do that. No, she stayed in a house I would have got lost in. I said, well, I'll give you £1 back. And she took it. She
Oh
took
dear.
that £1. She took it back. And when I came out of that house that day, I thought, I'll never do that in my life ever again. I got me a fish supper that night between the 2 years, but I thought, I'll never do that in my life again. I'll put it in the bin first. So it was a lesson learned. And less than a year later, I decided I've had enough. I've had enough of this. I need an alternate source of income. So this job came up with South Lanarkshire Council looking after a community centre. So I looked at it, and the director guy who interviewed me, he said, don't know why you want this job. He said, because you look as if you're a bit cleverer than what's required here. And I'm explaining to him, this would be perfect for me. This is my own studio if I get this. 24 hours a day if I want. And he says, well, that suits us as well. As long as the community get to use the hall, there's no complaint. I said, well, it's your call then. I can do that. Everybody can be happy. So I got the job, and I was there for 32 years. I had my own students came to me at the hall there, and my whole life changed when I got that job. That was 1980. The amount of people that I met from that job in 1980, my life just completely flipped. I met my pipe major, who became my best friend. I met Nigel Tranter, the Scottish author. Some say second only to Sir Walter Scott and his writings on Scottish history. I knew Nigel for about 20 years until he died in 1980, and then I played pipes at his funeral, helping one of the men who helped to carry his coffin was a man called Ian Hamilton. I don't know if you remember the stealing
Yeah.
of destiny in 1952, was it?
Yeah, I've read the story many times.
Ian Hamilton was the guy that kind of manoeuvred that. Well, Ian was a friend of Nigel Tranter's, and he was carrying the coffin. Well, I was piping the coffin in and out and back to the. So I got to know Ian Hamilton as well. Then Jimmy Reid opened an exhibition for me. Remember Jimmy Reid for the Clyde side? Jimmy was a character in the half as well. All these people were forming ideas and images in my head and my life that I'd never had a chance to do before. It was fantastic. I remember going for Jimmy opened the exhibition. We had an exhibition on Scottish history, all the characters, the events, the places in Scotland's history. And Jimmy opened this exhibition for me. And then we went for lunch, and I think it was the Bentley Hotel in Motherwell. And Jimmy was sitting down at the table, and he says, "That's fantastic." He says, "I can't get away with it. An ordinary printer like you doing all these informative paintings about Scotland's history." He says, "An image is better than 1,000 words." He says, "Where do you get all your information from?" I said, "Well, all over the country." I said, "I travel up and down the length and breadth of Scotland and get talking to different people." I said, "But Edinburgh is a good place for history." I said, "Anything that happened in Scottish history generally happened in the high street in Edinburgh, whether it was a crowning or an execution. It would happen in the high street in Edinburgh, the nature of the thing." And he said, "Don't talk to me about Edinburgh." And at the time, Princess Street was not what it is today. But he said, "Don't talk to me about Edinburgh." He said, "See, whenever anything's on in the playhouse in Edinburgh and my wife wants to go there, I just tell her, you're no going." And I said, "What did you say that for then?" He says, "Have you ever driven up Princess Street?" I says, "I kind of know what you're talking about. If you're on the right-hand side and you want to turn left, you forget it. You need to go the whole length of Princess Street and come back up the other side again." "Exactly," he said. "Pardon me for digressing for a minute." He said, "You ever heard of Joseph Mengele, the Nazi war criminal? Remember that? He was
Yeah.
the doctor that operated on all kinds of unfortunates in the death camps in Auschwitz and whatnot. You ever heard of Joseph Mengele, the Nazi war criminal?" He said. He said, aye. He said, "Well, people think he's dead." He said, "I'm here to tell you he's alive and well. He's a traffic warden in Princess Street." But Jimmy had loads of stories, a million stories. He was a really clever guy as well.
Let's go back to the art for a minute. Are you completely self-taught, or did you take lessons?
Totally.
Or
No, completely. It's a gift, Douglas. I wish I had maybe went to art school. Then I could claim some credit for having learned to do things. I did that, but I didn't. It's a gift. I could sit down and paint your portrait in a half an hour. Take me 71 years to be as quick as that, right enough, but it's a gift. I didn't learn how to do that. It's just a gift, and I'm more than aware that it's a gift. And that's why I had students for most of my life, passing on what I've got to them the easiest way I can do it. So it's a gift. I didn't go to school for it.
that's tremendous. Listen, we'll come back to your art a bit later when we talk to Burns. Let's talk a bit about your other interests. You talked about piping. How did you start that?
Getting that job at the village hall and the community centre in Uddingston, one of the people who came to ask to hire the hall was a man called Wilson Shaw, Pipe Major Wilson Shaw. And the community centre, as it was then, used to be an old church. And when it was the old church, before it closed down, Uddingston Pipe Band used to practice in the old church. And when they closed the church and they opened it up, the council opened it up, took it over and ran it as a community centre. Different people would come in and ask if they could hire the hall. And one of them was Wilson Shaw, Pipe Major Wilson Shaw, asking if he could hire the old church again. So I said, yeah. And we just clicked character-wise. I was into Scottish history. I always been into Scottish history. He was a pipe major. He knew all about Scottish music. I didn't know anything about bagpipe at all. And the more and more I got to know him, he then passed on a name to me. He said, if you're interested in Scottish history, read the words, the books by Nigel Tranter. He said, there's a book called The Wallace. He said, you'll love it. So I bought it and I couldn't put it down. I read it in a day, a whole book, I read it in a day. And little did I know that the author of that book would become a friend in years to come.
That's amazing. I remember reading it myself. It was a fantastic book.
Oh yeah. You see, if I could have had a book like that at school, I would have just told my mother and father, go and flit somewhere else. I'm staying here. I want to learn more about this. Because I learned everything I've got about Scottish history from Nigel Tranter. I don't think there was an inch of Scotland that he couldn't have told you what happened there 1,000 years ago. I knew him for 20 years and I was just mind blown with the information and knowledge that he had. It was fantastic.
Tremendous. And you've done a bit of writing yourself?
Yes, aye. In fact, just before Nigel died, I had been asked to go and play pipes at a wedding in Cheltenham, of all places. Turns out it was a friend of mine, his daughter who was in the Met Police in London, and she was getting married. She lived in Cheltenham, and she had asked her dad to ask me if I would go down and play at her wedding. So I said, I'm not going to have the border for anybody for no reason. I'm not doing it. I don't care if it's a wedding. I'm not doing it. So a couple of days later, Bob, her father, came to me and he said, the reason Gaynor is getting married so soon is she had a cancer problem and she's brought a wedding forward. So I couldn't get out. I had to go. So I went down to Cheltenham, did everything I was to do at the wedding, full dress. And then Jill and I, my wife and I, we didn't know a single soul at this wedding. So we were seated at, I can't remember how many big round tables in this big hall, big Tudor hall, with another 3 elderly couples. And I thought, oh, geez, this is going to be boring. But I noticed on the men's lapels, they had, every one of them had Gurkha Rifle Regimental badges on. So I thought, oh, this might not be so uninteresting after all. So then the lady sitting next to me, she asked me a question that totally changed my life and led to this book. She said, what regiment were you in? She thought I was a soldier because I was in full kit. And I said, I wasn't in a regiment. I said, missed all the gore, but missed all the glory as well. I said, what are you asking for anyway? And then she said, a far distant relative of the family had won a Victoria Cross. She said, and we've lost all trace of him. All we know is that he was in a Scottish regiment and they had sold his Victoria Cross for the price of a loaf of bread. I said, oh, that's an interesting one. I said, what was his name? She said, David Mackay. She said, have you heard of him? I said, no, I haven't heard of him. I said, but if he exists, I'll find him because that's what I do. I study Scottish history in depth, and in my own house, I've got a huge library in Scottish history. I said, and if he's there, I'll be back to you. So I couldn't wait to get back up to Scotland. And her words were, he was in a Scottish regiment. His name was Mackay. So Mackay's, there's your clue. Where the Mackay's come from? The far north. You can't get any further north than, like say, Thurso area. Mackay. Sutherland. So I picked a book on the Argyll and Southern Highlanders history. Now I've got loads of books. I've lost count. I've got hundreds, if not thousands of books. I picked up the one on the Southern Highlanders and I opened it, looking up the history bit about the Victoria Crosses. Now, the Argyll and Southern Highlanders, I think we've got 13 Victoria Crosses. And the first one was David Mackay.
Amazing.
I couldn't believe it. And the more I read about him, I said, he does exist. And then I started reading more and more. And then I said, I need to find out about this guy. I phoned up Stirling Castle, which is the Argyll and Southern Highlanders headquarters. And I got through to a Sergeant Major Stubberfield. And I felt myself coming to attention on the phone, the way he spoke. Who is it you're looking for? And I said, his name is David Mackay. Well, I can tell you right away. He said, David Mackay is the first man to win the Victoria Cross. I said, what? He says, the first of the Southern Highlanders ever to win the Victoria Cross, and very first, amongst the very first to win it, because he actually helped to capture the guns that Queen Victoria said we should make the highest honour in the British Army of. So he helped to capture those guns at Sebastopol, at the Crimea. And then he tells me also that David Mackay stood in the thin red line at Balaclava, where 550 Highland foot soldiers held off 2,500 Russian cavalry. He was in that thin red line. I thought, really me, this woman down in Cheltenham had just asked me a simple question, and more I looked into it. I said, this is fantastic. This is going somewhere. And the more and more I thought about it, I'm telling Nigel Tranter, when I met him again, he says, write it down. Don't think any fancy words. He says, just write it down as the story develops to you. He says, it might develop into something. And that's exactly what I did. I just wrote it down as it was coming to me. And then I phoned the lady down in Cheltenham to tell her what I had found out. 3 or 4 days after I had spoken to this Sergeant Major Stubberfield, my letterbox clanged open, and in came this man's war record to the 93rd Southern Highlanders in 1857 when he won his Victoria Cross. Steven Spielberg would bite a leg off for a script of this guy's life. It's fantastic, man. And I phoned the lady down in Cheltenham to tell her that you won't believe this. And she's getting all emotional on the phone, and she's almost disbelief about what I'm finding out. So I said, leave it with me. I'm still working on it. And I said, I need to do something about this. The best thing I can do in my life is draw and paint. So I'm going to try and find out what he looked like. And I'm going to do a painting of him. So I asked Sergeant Major Stubberfield again, is there any photographs of David Mackay? He says, no. In those days, you didn't get anything like that. He says, you can make him look like Quasimodo if you want. Nobody contradicts you. I said, okay. So, right, I'm up to that. So I did this, or maybe that might be one of the things I'll send on to. I did a painting of him as he would have been standing in the thin red line with the red tunic and the dark green tartan kilt on, with a rifle and bayonet. What did I make him look like? I made him look a bit like myself. Now, at the time I was 48. I was 48 years old when this story was developing. And I made him look a bit like myself. So I posted it off to the lady in Cheltenham. Now I'm 6'3". I was 48 and bearded. Now she posted it off to her daughter who lived in South Africa. She was married to the son of the granddaughter of David Mackay, the granddaughter of David Mackay, a woman who's still alive, who is the granddaughter of the man who stood in the thin red line at Balaclava.
That's amazing.
So she had posted this off there, telling her what the story had developed in Scotland about her forefather, David Mackay. And a week later, my phone goes in my kitchen, and it's this wee old high-pitched voice, and it was David Mackay's granddaughter, and she was in the late 80s then, and she says, "How did you get the likeness of my forefather?" And I said, "I didn't." I said, "I've just made him look a wee bit like myself." I said, "Because there isn't any likenesses." She says, "I know that." She says, "Let me send you something you'll find of interest." So I said, "Well, okay." I'm shaking like anything because I'm talking to a direct descendant of the man who stood in the thin red line at Balaclava. He actually won his Victoria Cross in India. He was one of the first through the gates of India. But a week later, in my letterbox comes a letter from South Africa, and I opened it up. It was from the old lady in South Africa. Norma Jean Burgess Mackay was her name. And in it was a diary kept by his son, James Mackay, when James Mackay was a wee boy in 1880 when his father died. David Mackay died in 1880, taking a bullet in the lungs at Lucknow, and that's what actually killed him eventually. But in the diary, amongst other things, the life of what life was like in Scotland, but settled in Lesmahago, was a written description, physical description of his father when he died. He was 48 years old, 6'3", a beardy.
Oh, wow.
And that's what struck the old lady in South Africa.
Things that spooky.
There's no way I could have known that. There is absolutely no way I could have known that. And that was the first thing that gave me a wee kind of shiver up the back of my neck. There's something else happening here. And I'm telling Nigel Tranter about all this, and he says, "You have to write all this down." He says, "This is going somewhere, you don't know where it's going to take you." But then he died. He died in 2000, the year 2000. So he didn't see the culmination of it. The culmination of it was the Scottish Parliament, because the Parliament debated the book that I wrote and then supplied it to every school and library in central Scotland. A book about Scotland's Victoria Crosses. That itself, if I never do anything else the rest of my life, I'm proud as anything of that. But that developed into a monument down in Hamilton. I discovered that Lanarkshire had 14 Victoria Crosses. Scotland's got 172 Victoria Crosses. Nobody under the sun knew that. I researched them, found a lot of them. I've got 2 or 3 books on Scotland's Victoria Crosses that were written before, but they always number in the 150 or 160. I found 172. And from that, there's a monument now, a 12-foot monument down in Hamilton, there forever. That'll be there long after I'm gone.
That's amazing. And is your book still available?
No, I've got about half a dozen left, Douglas.
So that there's no point in us promoting it and getting folk to go to Amazon and get it, no?
If I could get another publisher, Douglas, that would take off, because the history that's got with the Parliament and all the rest of it, that's a definite selling point. Yeah. But it's difficult convincing a publisher to invest in it. I wish I could. I've another book written as well about the history of the Livingston family. That's incredible as well. It's just incredible.
Oh well, maybe
you build all these things up, and it's all leading to something. The latest thing is the Burns thing.
Yeah. Well, you've given us the perfect link into talking about Burns. But I wondered, you showed us earlier on that you'd your pipes with you. Any chance of a wee pipe tune just as an interlude before we start talking about Burns?
Aye, wee pipe. There's a play a wee chanter.
Brilliant.
A wee Burns tunes, eh?
That'd be perfect.
That do you? There you go. Well done.
Excellent. We'll maybe get something towards the end as
Sure.
well, but we'll work out what we can do about that. But in the meantime, you've given us the perfect link to pass over to Jim to start talking to you about your interest in Burns.
Sure. Yep.
First question is always, how did you come to have an interest in Burns? Where did you meet him? How did you collide with the idea of Burns?
I'd always had that thing in the back. Well, Scottish people are all over the world. You live wherever you go around the world, somebody will quote Robert Burns, a phrase for somewhere. So everybody knows something about Robert Burns in the background. And it's always been in the back of my head as well. And getting to know Nigel Tranter, the author, I'd asked Nigel one time if he had ever written anything about Robert Burns. And he said, no, he hadn't written anything about him, but he pointed me in the direction of a man called James Barke. And James Barke wrote 5 volumes on the life of Robert Burns. So I went searching them out and I got the 5 volumes. And like Tranter's book about the Wallace, as soon as I started reading it, I couldn't put them down. 5 volumes in the life of Robert Burns. And I found out that James Barke wrote very similarly to Nigel. I think that's why I stayed with it, because I just loved the way he wrote. He just made it real. He put colour into the story. And as I was reading each of these novels, different incidents and people would strike me. Oh, that's good. I like that wee story. So I would write something down about that. So I've got wee cards in each of these volumes up in my cupboard there. Different cards with different wee stories, wee brief bits in them. So out of these 5 volumes, I've got a card in each of them, and each of them's got maybe a dozen incidents in it that formed images in my head. As time went on, I've got all these images in my head, I've written them down, but I'm getting on with my life. People are asking me to put exhibitions on in Scottish history, different places. I met Ronnie Brown and Roy Williamson, the Corries. They came and opened that exhibition for me as well. And they're new great Burns tunes as well. But when all this settled down, I'd had quite a few exhibitions. I had my art students to run through the week as well. So my life was pretty full. And then the COVID thing struck 2 years ago, 2 years ago. And I'm in my own wee art studio and I've got nowhere to go, nothing to do, no exhibitions to put on. I'm going to do something about all these wee cards I've got in this James Barke volumes. So I then started to do a painting on about Robert Burns. I'd never done it in my life before. And I was delighted at this one in one day. I said, that's great. I'm happy with that. I'm going to try that tomorrow again, another one. So I've got these wee cards. There's another incident there. I like that one. So I'll do a painting on that incident. And again on the third day and the fourth day, I was doing a painting a day. 5 weeks solid. I was doing a painting every day on the life of Robert Burns, based on these cards that I had written a few years previously. And at the end of the 5 weeks, I had no plan to do it for 5 weeks, but I was just painting and painting and painting. And then one day, I had double vision. I could see everything. I could see 2 portraits I was doing. It gives you a fright, because I'm disgustingly healthy all my whole life, good eyesight and everything. All of a sudden, I could see 2 everything. So I ran out of my studio, which is in my back garden, into my 2 houses, looking at my 2 wives sitting there, and I thought, I need to do something about this is not right. So I had to go to a doctor and an optician, and both of them, when I explained to them what I'd been doing, both of them said the same thing. The strain in your eyes is creating the problem. Stop it. So I had to stop it. I didn't want to stop it because I was loving it. I was getting right into it. There was something happening in all these paintings. So I had to stop it for my own health's sake, my own eyes' sake. And then a voice in the back of my head said, count them. Count them. I had 37 paintings sitting in my house.
Or was it 74?
No. 37. 37. Robert Burns died when he was 37.
Oh. More spookiness. It's a good job this is going out near Halloween, all that spooky stuff.
I'm telling you, I knew there's not enough, Douglas. 37. So I hadn't even thought about that. So the voice is saying to me, let's run with this. Leave it at that. So I've got 37 paintings on Robert Burns' life. Died when he was 37. Who could be interested in this? Who more so than the Robert Burns World Federation? So I make an appointment to go through to Kilmarnock, and I take a folder through with photographs of these 37 paintings. And they said, they're good. We'll be in touch. Nothing. I got showed the door. And I thought, no, I'm not hanging about it. Something's happening here. This doesn't make sense that the World Federation of Robert Burns is not interested. So I went down to Alloway, to the museum. I'm not going to mention the guy's name, but the guy who ran the place there, I told him what my intention was. I said, I've got 37 paintings in the life of Robert Burns. I said, this has never been done before. He said, we've got more paintings in here of Robert Burns than I've ever seen. He said, I don't need any more. I said, you don't want to see what I've got though? Nobody's got what I've got. No. He says, and even if I did look at them, I said, you wouldn't get in here for 3 years. 3 years. I said, so you're not going to look at them? No. I said, but you're going to have that. They've got a monstrosity of a bust in one of the exhibition rooms there. That I think it was, again, I'm not going to mention the university, but a university for the East Coast. They got students for there today, what they thought was the likeness of Robert Burns based on his skull. Now, it looks no more like Robert Burns than it looks like a Neanderthal man. It's an embarrassment. It's almost human. Almost human. Robert Burns, never in a million years. I says to him, you've got people coming from all over the world here to look and get information about Robert Burns, what he said, what he did, what he looked like, and you're presenting that to them. I said, you should think Blackburn and shame yourself. So he just showed me the door. He happily showed me the door. But I was kind of happy to get out of there because I thought, this is not the place for these paintings. These are too good for there. So I was left in kind of limbo. I've got 37 paintings. And you know this, Douglas, on the way home in my car, my phone went. My hands-free phone. So I clicked on that. I'm driving back to Hamilton. And the guy said, "Is that Duncan Brown there?" I said, "Yeah." "The artist?" I said, "Aye." He says, "You're pretty good." I says, "I know. What are you looking for?" I said, "Who are you?" He told me his name. A guy from Dunfermline. He says, "I'm interested in 2 of your paintings. I've seen what you've done on Facebook." I said, "All right." He said, "Well, what you'll need to do is come to my house then." He said, "Okay." So I gave him my address and he came to Dunfermline to my house. And he came in the house with a carrier bag, which with what I thought was a bottle of wine and a box of chocolates from my wife. So he put them down at the seat, we poured him a coffee, got to know him a wee bit, and he says, "Can I see the paintings now?" I said, "Ah, certainly." So I had them all framed in my sun lounge. So I brought the 2 that he mentioned he was interested in. He says, "These are even sharper than they look on Facebook." I said, "Right, okay." He says, "Have you got the other ones as well?" I said, "Right, there's 2 there." He says, "Can I see them?" So I brought the other 35 out into my living room. They're pretty soon we couldn't move for all these paintings in the living room. He says, "I love these." I said, "Oh, well, if you're happy with the ones that you liked anyway," I said, "We'll go for that." He says, "How much you want for them?" I says, "They 2 there." He says, "No, them all. I'll buy them all off you." I said, "You buy them all?" I says, "Well, you live in a castle or something?" He says, No, I live in a big house." He says, "But I want to buy them all off you." I says, "Well, I need to try and come up with a figure for that then." He says, "I'll tell you what, I'll give you what's in the carrier bag." I says, "What's in the carrier bag?" She says, "There you go." So I looked at the carrier bag and I opened the carrier bag. It's got £12,000 in cash in the carrier bag.
Wow.
And I says, "I was actually looking for 12,100. I said, "No, but that's fine. I'll take that. That's fine." So he went away with that, 37 paintings. And I'm sitting with 12 grand cash. And I said, "Something's happening here. Something is definitely happening here." He's away happy. I'm happy. But somehow or other, we're not finished. We're still in the lockdown. It's getting worse. I'll just do another couple of paintings. Another couple of paintings developed into 120 dollars. I've got 120 paintings in Robert Burns. And more and more and more I studied the life of Robert Burns. What tragedies and glorious things that happened in his life. He loved being famous. He absolutely loved it. And then another guy I know, to Clydebank, asked if he could film all these paintings as well. So we made a wee film. I'm actually sitting here, the same spot I'm sitting in now, talking about these paintings. And he made a film out of it and showed it in a wee film studio out in Clydebank. And these ladies and gentlemen came to this wee film studio to see this film that I had done about Robert Burns. Now, as a piper, I've piped at 100 burn suppers, and I've seen all kinds of things happening at burn suppers. Singing, dancing, fighting, all kinds of things at burn suppers. But never in my life have I seen a reaction that I got at the end of that film show when I finished it with telling the audience about the death of Robert Burns. At the end of it, is the way I promoted it, 100% emotion in it. And I finished up just toasting and asking people to remember Robert Burns. 2 old women come up with their message bags, greeting. I didn't know anything about Robert Burns before, so that just break my heart. And shake my hand, clap me in the back, and away they went. I don't know who they were, where they came from, but I'd never seen a reaction like that to the life of Robert Burns. And I knew then I've done something really good here. And I know that this thing doing Sanquhar is good. I don't know where it's going to take me now, but funny feeling it's not finished yet either. Don't know.
Tell us a bit about the exhibition at Sanquhar, because I mean, our Burns Club is coming down to visit it and getting a chance to talk to you. So tell us a wee bit about it.
A guy, Jeff Crowley from New Cumnock. Jeff contacted me on Facebook. He's seen some of the paintings on Facebook, and I had an idea I would like to see some of the bars, pubs that Rab had visited down in that area. So Jeff said, come down. He says, pick me up and you come. He says, I'll take you around. So I'm looking to get to at least a dozen pubs. I think I made 3 that day. 3. Going to different places, getting lost with Jeff and different places as well. But one of the places we called into was in Sanquhar, to all the apes. And I went in and spoke to a lady in there, and I showed her my big portfolio of photographs of the Robert Burns. And Yvonne is an English lady, and she was blown away with us. And she said, what is it you're looking for? I said, I'm looking for someone to have an exhibition, maybe. She says, you found it? So I said, in here? She said, yeah, and she showed me this place. Now, it's in 3 floors. The place is covered with paintings now on the life of Robert Burns. Up the 2 stairways, completely covered with paintings. The cafeteria is completely covered with paintings. And the big function room on the top floor is completely covered with paintings on the life of Robert Burns. And Yvonne was telling me, the place has never been busier because of this Robert Burns exhibition. So they're making some money out of it. I'm making a wee bit out of it. But I don't care about money. I've seen money in my life. I don't really care about that at all. What I'm interested in is the next stage. What I'd love to do would be to see a book about this, because I've got a folder with 120 paintings on one side and 120 descriptions, A4 descriptions on the other side. Now that's 240 pages, plus a 10-page introduction. That's 250 pages. That's a book, Douglas. That's a book.
Yeah, certainly is.
That Robert Burns people, I think, would love it. But it's going to take somebody with a bit of savvy to say, let's go down that road. I would hope that's what would happen. I would like to see that happen. I'm not really
if somebody out there's interested in that, they just need to get in touch with you.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I've done what I wanted to do, Douglas. I've got these paintings, 120 paintings on the life of Robert Burns. Burns is dead 225 years now. This has never been done before. Never. Somebody at the exhibition said to me, I didn't know Robert Burns had legs. Because I've got them in all kinds of situations. All kinds of situations. Because generally, that portrait you've got sitting behind you there, that's generally what people know about Robert Burns. It's the head and shoulders.
Yeah.
But I've got them in all kinds of situations in 120 paintings. That can only be good.
Tell me, on what did you base the face you use of Robert Burns?
The face?
Yes.
The face, that's the easy one. I've been in the company of 100 arguments about Burns, what he looked like, what he didn't look like. I've seen fights develop because of it. And then I can prove what he looked like. I can prove it. Photography came into being in the mid-1800s, 1850s-ish. There was no photography before that. The only image you got was paintings, people's ideas through paintings. So I found a photograph of Rab's youngest son, Colonel William Burns, who was a colonel in the British Army in India in 1854. There's a photograph of him in his uniform. Now, he's in his 50s, in his late 50s, and he's losing his hair a wee bit at the top. But see if you do that on that photograph, where his hair would have been the same as Rab's. That's Rab's face. I thought, that's quite convincing. And then I found another one. His great-great-granddaughter in 1896, a woman, obviously, with a woman's hairstyle, and do the same thing again. You do that on front of the hairstyle, and you look at that face, it's looking the same direction as that Burns portrait. It's the same face. I'm an artist. I know what I'm painting. and I painted those three faces together. It was the same face. To me, there's no arguing. That's Robert Burns. So you've got to say the Bugle portrait, the Skirving portrait, the Naismith portrait, they're pretty close because they're exactly the same as those photographs for the 1800s. Photographs. I'm almost 100% certain. As I say, I've heard the arguments, Jim, I've heard the arguments, I've seen fights and all the rest of it, but to me, those photographs prove what they look like.
The reason I ask is the Naismith one is the one that folk generally take as, as likeness of Burns. So you would corroborate that in a way?
Absolutely, yeah. The man was a great artist. I think I'm a good artist, and I don't think I would put something out there that I wasn't happy with. I don't think I would do that. And Naismith must have been happy with it. I know he was a landscape painter. I can paint landscapes as well. But I can also see that the guy is a great artist. So, but that connected with those photographs, I don't think you can argue with it. Sure.
Can I just ask you that, I mean, you've been talking about your paintings relating to incidents within Robert Burns's life, and you made me notes in the back books.
Yep.
Could you maybe just give us an example by picking one of these incidents, telling us what it was and what kind of painting that engendered?
Sure. There was a time Rob had a pal, Robert Ainsley, same kind of age group, and Rob had asked Robert if he could come and live with Robert Ainsley's mother and father, the family, for a week or two, as he was collecting subscriptions for his book of poems. A certain amount of people had given subscriptions. So Rob was going down to collect them. And Robert Ainsley had said to his mother and father, is it all right if Robert Burns comes and stays with us for a couple of weeks? No bother. As long as he falls in with the tradition of the family, which one of the traditions would have been going to the kirk on a Sunday. So Rob says, no bother, no problem. So during the week, Rob got to know the whole family, including Robert Ainsley's sister, Rachel Ainsley. She was a 17-year-old. And when the Sunday came around, they all went to the kirk. And the Ainsley family are sitting at the back, a couple of rows for the back, and Rob's sitting behind them. And the minister's giving it hellfire and damnation, as they did in the days, the old light preachers. And the congregation sitting there listening to him. And then he said, right, we're now going to look up 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 38. So he looks up his Bible and he's waiting for everybody else in the congregation to get this same scripture. So they all look it up. And Rachel, she doesn't know where it is. So she's going to have a book. Oh no, it's not there. Oh no, it's back the other way. So pretty soon, she's the only one that's making a noise in the church by flicking over the pages, back and forth, back and forth. And she's getting redder and redder because everybody's looking at her. Come on, hurry up. And the minister saw her embarrassment as well. And rather than try to cover it up for her, he just waited there until she found it. But at the same time, Robert Burns is sitting behind her, seeing the predicament that the minister was putting her in her embarrassment. And Rab went into his pocket, a piece of paper and a pencil out, and wrote 4 lines and passed it out to her. And it said, "Fair maid, you need not take the hint, nor idle text pursue. It was guilty sinners that he meant, no angels such as you." See that? That's painting with words. That's painting with words. In an instant, he came up with that. I can only imagine and hope that Rachel Ainsley kept that her whole life. In an instant, that was an image in my head, and that's one of the paintings that's at all the Apes as well. I loved it. I loved it.
Tremendous. Well, Duncan, it's been fantastic listening to you telling these stories, and I'm sure we could do another episode at a later date.
Sure.
And you said to us earlier on that you'd be happy to let us have some of the images to attach to the end of this episode, and that would be brilliant. And, and
no
maybe
problem.
maybe we can even get a wee bit of your piping as well.
Ah, sure.
But in the meantime, we'll just need to tell our audience, because some of them will see this before your exhibition finishes, that it's on all the airs in Sanquhar. And it finishes on the 30th.
30th, Saturday the 30th, yeah.
Right. So if anybody wants to see it, they need to get out there and see it quickly.
Yeah. Closes on a Saturday at 2 o'clock.
But before that, you come to Burns Club's coming to visit, and you're going to tell them all about the paintings, and they're all looking forward to it.
I hope so. I hope so. But no heckling, mind.
That's a big ask.
Well, I just want to say, Duncan, on behalf of Jim and myself, thanks very much for telling us about your life with Robert Burns. Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Thanks again.